question from the Discord this week is, what is the Steelman argument against ivermectin? And I think there's a number of ways that could be taken, right? Like, what is the Steelman argument against taking ivermectin prophylactically, against using ivermectin as treatment, against discussing it publicly? Like, I can't make a Steelman argument against discussing it publicly.
Well,
can't do it.
I would just argue,
But
the
first two, I think I can.
Right.
Yeah.
There is no argument against ivermectin, right?
Right.
The point is, it is a substance.
Right.
Should it be applied? Shouldn't it be applied? We can talk about the various cases.
Nor should scientists ever try to steelman let's not talk about that thing, which is on a list of possible helpful, or explanatory issues. Right. So that possible interpretation, which is not what I think they mean here, I don't think we should even attempt to steelman. But what is the steelman argument against, it being useful and safe, say, as prophylaxis and as treatment, as two potentially separate things?
I want to take the prophylactic one, if that's all right.
That's the one that I have some stuff on, but go for it.
Okay.
I probably you and I are actually going to say some different things.
All right. So what I would say is, because of the way ivermectin is used on label, we don't actually know what the consequence of using it regularly for an extended period of time is, and it is likely to be negative. Is it going to be significantly enough negative to worry about? Probably not. The drug's safety profile is so good that extrapolating from periodic use to regular use is probably not going to result in a significant error. We're probably not going to get surprised, but we could, and that's the problem. Now, the alternative is actually something that has been done in a number of the cases where it's been effective, where it's been used elsewhere, which is the dispensing ivermectin on first symptom, even before tests come back, and to people who are in the same household as somebody who has had their first symptom. Mm-hmm. I think that there is a very strong argument for that, right? You reduce the likely long-term cost of taking a drug, any drug, right? And you get the majority of the benefit. And the only reason I would have hesitancy about that being the best approach is that there is some evidence of symptom-free cases that do damage. Now, I'm not sure that evidence is going to stand up.
Do damage to the individual who was always asymptomatic.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so my guess is that doesn't stand up all that well, but we don't know. And to the extent that that is possible, what it means is that somebody could get a case, they could get damage, and they would not be triggered to go get the drug. And that is the reason that I would say prophylactic, in spite of the unknowns about the long-term use, is the way to go. But I would love to be persuaded otherwise, because it would be marvelous. I mean, Dr. Corey, in fact, advocates that everybody should have it on hand in the pandemic because, COVID can strike anybody, including vaccinated people. Right. And having it on hand so there's no delay is the way to get the maximum value out of it without paying the price of taking it regularly.
Yeah. I guess I have sort of two arguments against prophylactic, steelmanning the argument against prophylactic ivermectin, and one I mentioned in the first hour, which is that I think it is actually true that given that compliance is understood to be difficult for people to take regular things, that the sort of one and done or two and done with the vaccine, you at least know. Right, like you know that number of people have been vaccinated, and if the vaccines do what we're being told they do, then they are protected. You don't have to keep worrying about them. You don't have to keep worrying about whether or not they're doing what they said they were going to do. So that's one reason to, in general, all else being equal, do you prefer vaccine or prophylaxis? You prefer vaccine. I prefer vaccine. I've been waiting for a malaria vaccine for a long time. I've been on a lot of terrible malaria prophylaxis in my life, right? So that's one thing, and then the other is that with the particular ivermectin is discovered in Japanese soil in the 1970s, and is somewhat quickly discovered to have antihelminthic properties, and now it is understood to have anti-inflammatory properties, antiviral properties. One of the mechanisms of action that we understand it to have is that it actually binds to the spike protein of SARS-CoV-2. it's got a lot of properties, right? And one of the things that we now know that we didn't know 50 years ago is that our microbiome is actually a necessary part of a healthy human being. A human individual is not a single thing. We contain multitudes, and we're all of these things. And what else is ivermectin binding to? And thus taking out of the gut, such that maybe your gut health is not as good. You are unlikely to get sick from SARS-CoV-2 or get a worm or scabies or the other things that are on label, and presumably there's a lot of other off-label things that ivermectin would work for too. Anytime you're taking something with that sort of broad spectrum is usually used for antibiotics, but with that sort of a broad effect, you have to assume that it's going to be affecting things also that you want in your body. And so I suspect that there would be long-term gut effects and microbiome problems, and that you would at the very least want to be making sure to be eating a lot of ferment and otherwise taking in your sort of probiotics. But that is one reason that, for any drug, I don't want to be on it for very long.
Yep.
And this is my particular concern about ivermectin.
Yeah, I think the fact of its generality also suggests that it's going to necessarily do some things you'd rather it didn't do.
Yeah, it's not only going after the bad stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like it doesn't care.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would also, just as a final point, one thing that is, I actually noticed this in one of the studies that I was looking at that was not very effective. And I looked into the study.
The study finds that ivermectin isn't very effective.
Yeah, and it had two flaws that I saw. One was that it was quite delayed in the course of the disease, and this is going to be a general issue. But the other was that the administration of it it was taken on an empty stomach. Now, this is one of the interesting wrinkles with this drug, is that when you are taking it for a gut parasite, you want to take it without fat, because what you want it to do is be in the gut, right?
And you want it to be basically be able to find the thing that you're trying to target with.
Right. You're poisoning your parasite, and
Right.
so you want it to be where your parasite is. If you are trying to take it to prevent COVID, then you want it to get into your blood, and you want it to cross. And so it's fat soluble, and so it needs to be in a fat in order to cross. So this is one of it's a hazard of the studying it. You can get a study that doesn't show very much effect because
they don't know that one thing.
Well, think about it this way, right? If you're running a study and you're trying to eliminate noise, an empty stomach is a noiseless stomach compared to take it with food, right? So
you had a hamburger, you had peanuts. What did you have?
Right. And so, ideally the study would be like an empty stomach, but for some fat, a shot of olive oil or whatever. But the point
That's
is,
what we should have had with the Q&A. Shots of olive oil.
And we could have drunk them every time we said, here's the thing, or something.
It's going to be a very slippery studio before we're done.
Could be.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think actually I'm proud of our team effort at steel manning this one. I think we've done all right.
Yeah.